Folks, I'm Guru Bhatt. I work for PayPal, and obviously, I wear a lot of PayPal t-shirts as well. It's my pleasure to have a power-packed panel with me. As the first participant in the panel, I'd like to call upon Priya Subramani. Priya is VP of e-commerce at Walmart Sam's Club. She specializes in online advertising, mobile, internet products and services, SaaS, as well as enterprise software. Next, I'd like to call upon Sudhir Anandarao. Sudhir is a VP of product management at Salesforce. He has over 22 years of general management experience in value-based care, health plans, self-insured employers, and successfully scaling companies from startup to high growth and maturity. And lastly, I'd like to call upon Rakesh Agarwal, the man with probably the most famous last name in the tech industry right now. Rakesh is the CTO and CPO of Wooqer and brings leadership experience of 20 plus years in product, design, and engineering. Priya, Rakesh, and Sudhir, welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to spending the next 25 minutes or so with all of you discussing a very germane topic for India in particular, especially in the context of world class from India. I think today, when you look at it, we are truly on the cusp of a product revolution, which is defined by two things. One, that India has been traditionally strong in, which is technology, and one that we definitely have to stake a claim to, which is innovation. End of the day, the two of these together are very core to developing world-class technology products from India so that we can actually lay claim to this motto of world class from India. So the 18th edition of NPC, which is where we are right now, is all about transforming businesses and lives. And this transformation, as we've all seen in the context of the last 18 to 20 months, is that digitization and technology is at the heart of this transformation of life, not just business. So as we strive towards developing a seamless ecosystem, let's also talk about product leadership and what it means, because I think in India we have a very rich tradition of having created behemoths and titans in the world of services, and it's amazing the kind of legacy and the kind of spotlight that they have brought to India, and I tip my hat to the pioneers in that world. And I think we are on the cusp of a revolution, a similar revolution that's going to happen in the product world. So when you look at why we build great products and what we want to build those great products for and how we are going to do them, there's an element of data driven reasoning and rationale. There's an element of customer centricity. There's an element of customer empathy. All of these play into determining how you can actually build great products. So I'd like to go around the table, and this question is going to be common, and I'd like to start with you, Priya, and hopefully Rakesh next, and then Sudhir at the end. When you hear the word product leadership mindset, what does that mean to you? Like, what are the top qualities or attributes somebody should have to exhibit this kind of a mindset?
Thanks, Guru. Delighted to be here at NASCOM Product Conclave. I think increasingly what we're finding is we live in a very VUCA world, right, where it's very volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. And in this kind of environment, I think what we really need when you say product leadership mindset, it's really about that strategic thinking, right, where you can prevail against all odds, right, and also be able to capitalize on any new opportunities you see there. So it's really not just reacting, but being able to create relevance based on the environment and the situation around. I think, the second part of the question is, what are some of those characteristics or traits that we really need is, I think we need a very non-conformist attitude, but still very, very disciplined, right? Where you have that independence of thinking, you're not looking to do what others are doing. You are really looking at your own core values, your own aspirations, and how do you stay true to those? How do you focus on metrics, focus on the customer, focus on your goals? The other is, I think, we really need to experiment. So it's about being empirical in but yet experimenting. So it's really a world of paradoxes, right? But it really means trying things out. You really try small experiments, like Tim Collins would say, like the bullets, see what sticks, and then the cannonballs, right? and it's also being able to look at what's happening outside and then be able to zoom in and execute, like looking at what's changing in the market, what's changing in consumer behavior, what's changing, the weak technology signals, and how do you factor all of that and then build your strategy.
Awesome. Wonderful. Very, very, very valid points, Priya, and thank you for that. How about you, Rakesh? From your experiences with Tally as well as with other companies and Wooqer,
Yeah,
like, what's your take on this?
I've been fortunate enough to work with all through my career with product and especially with B2B companies. So I'm not the best guy to answer it for B2C, but for B2B, I can definitely give some insights out of my experience. And maybe it's relevant for B2C, but maybe there's more to it, right? Uh, I think I'll cut the fluff around. I'll come to basically what is a product and hence what is the leadership around the product. Right? So, product is a response to an opportunity. Right? It's a response to an opportunity, and either you are leading a product which is already maximizing that opportunity or going deep in terms of making it grow. Right? So product leadership, if you look at, is comes down to really two main qualities. If I have to look at, is the depth of problem solving. Right. I think a lot of time we do a shallow problem solving. Is a हो गया ना 90% हो गया तो we don't go off the way to solve. So problem solving and the tenacity to go deep enough, because once, see, you solve one problem which is without the product, but once you give the product there is another kind of problem happens because the product creates a problem, right? So I think problem solving for that opportunity that you have picked up is one big trouble area, is what I see, that we don't go in depth, and if we do that I believe we become a great product leader. The second problem which I feel is, once you have solved that, you have to keep opening new doors, right? So the second big problem as a leader is you can't get stuck and get hung with what you have. You have to keep opening new doors and keep on expanding the opportunity, because you get typecasted, you get bound by what you have solved well, right? So opening that up is an absolute element of leadership. So I think your imaginations play out rather than tenacity, right? So it's a very thin line. Sometimes you are playing very imaginary role but not solving the current issue, or you are solving the current issue but not solving the imaginary problem. So if you balance that out, I think is a great product leader, is my great problem solver and imagination to open a new door is a great skill.
Fabulous, Rakesh. Thank you very much. And over to you, Sudhir.
Firstly, Guru, thank you for the kind introduction, and really excited to be part of the NASCOM Product Conclave. It's an amazing forum. We've been at it for a number of years right now in the India product ecosystem. So really good to see it sort of blossoming the way it has. I think I'd sort of piggyback on what both Rakesh and Priya have touched on, Guru, and maybe I'll take a slightly um, of a team mindset to it. And what I mean by that is, if you really think about product leadership, could be in a B2B environment, B2C, could be a startup, could be a larger company. I think what it really comes down to is, are you truly empowering your teams to be uh, sort of fully capable? And by that I just don't mean product teams. These are product design, engineering teams, sort of the trifecta, if you will, the three prongs of that stool. Are they truly empowered to, and do they have the latitude to make decisions? But you cannot sort of just throw a problem statement at them and say, go sort of figure it out, go make it happen. You got to give them context, and that context is really important. It typically starts with sort of the what I call 3 year to 10 year-ish kind of approach, which is typically a vision, which then leads to sort of what is our key north star that we want to get to from a product perspective. Then you start getting into things like product strategy, which is sort of the how do I actually make that happen, what is the team that is required to be able to do that, and so on. And I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, as product leaders, we have to be comfortable enough in our skin, if I may put it that way, to be able to let go of the reins a bit. It's very easy for us to just sort of hold on and take a very top down, as they say, command control kind of approach, as opposed to really being able to give our teams the latitude, give them the space, have the faith that yes, they will try things, but they may make mistakes, they may fail at it, but do they have the opportunity to be able to learn from those failures and really come up with world class offerings after going through some of those learnings? So I'll just pause there. I think those are some of the key sort of messages I wanted to get across, which is, uh, empowerment. How do we make sure our teams have the latitude and the space? How can they, in fact, and probably more so in, I'd say, larger environments as opposed to startups, how do they have the, if you will, the air car, if you will, to try things, to be able to fail, to not be afraid to really push the envelope on stuff, and then be able to use that to pivot, or be able to take that learning and move in a direction where it really makes sense from a customer perspective.
Fabulous, Sudhir, and just keeping you still under the spotlight for a couple more minutes. You mentioned about large companies and startups, and that begs the question for me. From
Mhm.
your vantage point, do you see a difference in the way product management or product leadership mindset is exercised in a startup company versus a large company? And I ask this question because we are very likely to have a diverse set of people tuning in, some of whom are in startups and some are in large companies. And I'd
Mhm.
love for you to give your opinion on that.
Sure. And maybe to just set some context, I've probably made more switches than I should have in my career, in terms of, having done a startup myself, then having been at a venture capital firm, been at larger companies, sort of done a bit of back and forth. And I think the contrarian view that I take, Guru, is that I don't think it's really very different. I think it comes down to culture, it comes down to mindset, it comes down to, what are some of the key traits that you'd want to look for, in a product person, in terms of just, some of the, I'd say, the more trite things which we typically overlook:
Hmm.
curiosity, fire in the belly. Are you sort of what folks refer to as a rapid learner or an agile learner? By that I mean, you don't always know what's going to be thrown at you. You don't know what the next new thing that is that you'd have to learn. Are you able to pick up something that's completely out of your zone and be able to pick it up in a way that you can really start to connect the dots, if you will? I think those are some of the skills that we sometimes underplay to a large extent, in favor of, okay, do you know technology, have you built products, do you have a bunch of successes under your belt? Yes, those are important, but at the end of the day, and we all sort of know Vinod Khosla is one of our most sort of revered venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, and he talks a lot more about failure than he does about success. And what he says is, there's so much I can learn from failure that it tells me not to do the same thing again. But if I haven't failed, it doesn't give me the opportunity to succeed. Granted, that's a little harder to do in a larger environment, because you do need to deal with sort of the dynamics of stakeholders and teams that you're working with, and what have you. But with sort of the right, I'd say, structure, with the right leadership in place, and people willing to back you on taking risks, you can still be able to do that, much like what you do in a startup environment. So those are some of the thoughts I'd sort of leave you with.
Awesome. Thank you, Sudhir. And just turning to another very pertinent question that's relevant for the audience here, right? Priya, looking at your bio, you've had a stellar career around across various different companies of different sizes. And if I look at one pattern that emerges from the work that you've done, you've built products for the globe. Right now, in your role at Walmart, Sam's Club as well, you're building products for customers who are geographically separated from you and your team, so to speak, right? So when you look at most work that is going on in many of the companies in India today, most of us are actually building products for the globe, not just the engineering work, but product as well. And from your own experience as a product leader, how do you train, enable, empower all of your PMs on very core must-have capabilities, right? Like customer empathy, the experience that the customer would need in the context of the culture that they work in and live in. Nuances for building for the globe, given that your product managers are geographically separated in many cases from your core customer cohort. So, what are some of the tips and tricks, if you will, from your bag in terms of compensating for these conditions?
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that doesn't change anywhere is the focus on the customer, right? Your customer may be different, and every customer is going to be different. The industry is going to be different based on geography, their own demographic. Everything is going to be different. So I think really developing that understanding of that customer is key, right? And I do believe you can actually build global platforms as well with a little bit of tweaking. But I think the key is really understanding what is the purpose that you're here for. What is the purpose that your product is trying to serve? What is that product market fit, which means you really need to understand your customer. Once you understand your customer, and what are those underserved, or what is that purpose that you're serving for the customers, right? And then you build your value proposition and features and everything else based on that. Now it is very, I think, the biggest mistake that all product managers and anyone who's building products tends to make is to imagine you are the customer. Especially in consumer facing, it's very easy to kind of think of yourself as the customer, right? Especially if it's like an area like e-commerce, that's the way I shop. But when you really think about the customer, there are customers who are new to the entire online and e-commerce, who've never done online payments. So you have to kind of really understand the customer. And I think the way you develop this understanding is really spending a lot of time on data, like trying to understand the flow, the funnel, right? People come, they search, why are they not buying? Why did they drop off after search? Are they not finding? I mean, are they searching differently? And you follow that entire thing, so you see the pattern from data. You do a lot of user research. I mean, you really need to conduct research to say what is it that you're looking at. How do you go about doing what you're trying to do? And I'm talking primarily for consumer facing products. It's a little easier, I would say, if it is B2B, where you can actually talk to customers, because your profile of customers, and you can find that the least common denominator there. But so I would say, for consumer facing, it's really about data. It's really about spending a lot of time hearing customer care, right? When they call into customer service, what is it that they're coming out with? Why is, one of the metrics that's really important is your whole NPS, or your net promoter score. So what part of the journey did they have trouble with? There's this pick and rule, which sort of says, how you feel about the experience is how you navigated like the most frictionful part of it, and how you felt at the end. So there's a lot of attention that you need to pay for. What is that feeling for the customer? How do they feel after they accomplish what they want to do? And so it's really, you have to build the discipline of, one, looking at data, hearing customer care, trying to read complaints that customers came up with, a lot of user research, and really building this culture of where you experiment, right? You have these AB experiments that you can conduct, especially when it comes to online, where you conduct it and see, is there a certain insight that you can draw from it? Did it work well for certain cohorts, right? So I think it's really a mix of all of this, and then really trying your best to understand who this customer is, and how would you, once you develop that obsession with the customer, I think everything else sort of falls in place.
Sounds good. Thank you, Priya. And there are a lot of questions from the audience as well, and I'll weave it in. But I have one question, Rakesh. Given your experience with B2B that you mentioned, right? There is a certain, I would say, similarity when you say B2B. There, in many cases, there is a little bit of dog fooding also that goes on when you build for a B2B. When you build a B2B product, very likely that your own company could potentially be a consumer of the same product. And in that, there's, I guess, a similarity with internal products, right? Because not every product manager on this in the audience right now is probably building for the external ecosystem. They may be building it for internal products as well. So from your experience, like, how do you approach the building of these internal products? How different is it from an approach that you would take to build external products? There will obviously be challenges in terms of support, budgets, people as well, because many product managers probably automatically favor working on external products than internal products out of perception and things like that. So any of those challenges, anything that you can shed some light on, that will be awesome.
Yeah, so Guru, the very subtlety about the product is it needs to go out. It can't be an internal. Okay, if it is internal, then it is a project and not a product. Okay, so the cases that I have seen in B2B is even if it is an external product, do you eat your own dog food inside? So a lot of time we fail to do that. So I have more messages for people who are actually taking a B2B product outside. Are you using your own product internally within the organization? Are you first yourself moving right into using your own food, product that you created, and your user is next door, is next to you. Right? You don't need to go far away and to get the feedback. You can out there figure out the challenge is when you are looking at product development, you're looking at across all customer base, right? Trying to build something that works. See, 0 to 1 is a journey with few customers, right? 1 to 10 is with few more, where you are making sure it is commercially and the business model is working. But 10 to 100 is all about scale, right? Like we at Wooqer are doing digitization of work apps, right, for businesses. Now, if we don't use it internally, or in my past I worked with Tally, if I don't use internally within the organization, taking it out to 2 million businesses there would not make sense, right? So at Wooker, what we do is we use our own product, first figure out whether we can use it or not. If we cannot use it for our own internal processes and internal work, there's absolutely no point in launching it for the customers. And a lot of door opening behaviors actually come to happen because you are doing it on the internal side. So you see an opportunity that gets created internally, right? And then you say, okay, can I take this to the world? So you have ideas that will come internally if you use it internally. So I definitely would encourage product managers to take products to internal teams and kind of get them use it. The ideas will come from there. In fact, there would be critique of your product and very friendly critique, they would say, right? And it'll be good to have that conversation take place in an organization.
Very nice, very nice. Well, time certainly flies when you're having fun. I realize that we barely have a little over 5 minutes to go, and there are some really interesting questions. And there's one from Kevin Thomas on from in the Q&A box here that I'll probably just merge with a question that I had, and I'd love to get all of your perspectives. And this will probably be a good note to exit on. So Kevin asks, considering that budget and time are constraints that usually constrain the opportunity to fail and pivot, what are strategies you adopted to manage the balance? And what I will add to that is my perspective is that great products are often built with the confluence of flow and focus, right? When product managers are in flow and have focus, that's when
Mhm.
great products get built by them. On the other hand, there are always cultural imperatives that within companies that incentivize orientation around faster time to market, or customer acquisition first and everything else you can figure out later, or expand aggressively into adjacencies and hyperscale. Like these are all the themes that play out in many companies. How do you handle this conundrum? I think this whole thing around failing and pivoting, being constrained by time and budget, the culture of the company always going against the grain in terms of flow and focus, which comes in the way of product leadership. I'd love for all of you to kind of take maybe very crisp articulation of your perspective on this important issue. I'll start with Priya, then Sudhir, and then Rakesh.
Yeah. So I think this is, yeah, I mean, these are always very finite constraints, right? Time and budget. So I think really having that fit very clear in terms of, who is it for? What is the purpose that you're serving? What is the impact that you're going to get from certain features or products? And being able to prioritize, put it into themes. What is the theme that you're trying to do? Is it growth? Is it you want to, penetrate a certain segment, whatever that might be? And then, ruthless prioritization in terms of, here's the impact, and here's, it's usually a trade-off between the level of effort and the impact that you get. So I would say really putting all of this together and helping you drive to, here's the next step should be part of your strategy.
Awesome.
I think the way I would approach it in terms of mindset, Guru, is um, if you're in a startup, you pretty much know you're constrained for a lot of things, and you're operating in that constrained fashion anyway. I think if you're in a larger company, think like you're a startup, right? Like, be scrappy, think like, you are operating as if your next paycheck depended on it. And I think that really forces folks to think in a very different way, as opposed to a mindset that is, I've got a really long runway to try these things. So I sort of go back to mindset first, and just how we approach things from a scrappy startup like perspective. Number two, I would try to sort of shortcut a lot of steps that we go through in product ideation by getting more quickly to what I call as a prototype, right? Like, don't spend too much time on documentation, don't spend too much time on slide decks. Really doesn't help, right? Like, work with your designer, work with your engineer, a UX person typically, come up with a low-fi or a high-fidelity prototype, take it to the target market, get feedback, and sort of building on what Priya was saying, like, ruthlessly iterate, right? Like, have a very rapid iteration cycle where you pretty much get a pulse very quickly, whether it's B2B or B2C, on what's sticking, what's not sticking. Do you really need 20 things? Maybe you only need two things, right? It's easier for us to add more things. It's a lot harder for us to cut things. So how do I get to the top two or three things that I need to have in my offering? And I can always build off of that in future iterations. So those would be some of the thoughts I'd leave folks with.
Thank you, Sudhir. And Rakesh, for you to wrap this up with your final comments.
Budget and time is a very important constraint, and it's good to innovate, because if those were not there, I believe we would not be accelerating innovation at the pace that we are doing. I see that's imperative. It is definitely a best thing to have. If we, the day we understand budget and time, we all have a limited time on, on Earth, right? And if we don't think that way, that we have a limited time, and each day when we come, we kind of need to move the needle. And if we don't do that, I think we are, I have a limited time, right? And I want to move the needle each day. I think that mindset is very, very essential, be it corporate, be it startup. And so I think time is very limited for everyone. And let's have fun. Let's solve the problem of the customer. Let's create an impact, and do it rapid, do it fast. I think there are different models. Everybody has spoken. I don't want to talk about it, but it's not a constraint. It is good that we have a limited budget, and it's good that we have a limited time.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So, folks, you heard it there. I think with leaders like Priya, Sudhir, and Rakesh, the Indian product ecosystem is in very good hands if they are just an indicative sample of the kind of leaders we have in the ecosystem. So, Priya, Rakesh, Sudhir, thank you so much for an extremely engaging and informative discussion. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of the year, and Happy New Year in 2022 to you and your families and all the audience that's listening in to us. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Guru.
Have a
Thanks
great
for
day, everyone.
a great
Have a good
moderating.
time.